A single mom got a mysterious call at death of night to perform a forbidden act by a millionaire. But just as she was about to hang up, she heard him whisper something that stopped her cold. One chilling sentence, one slip of the tongue, and everything changed. What began as a mistake turned into a life-altering decision, pulling her into a storm far darker than the one outside. She didn't know his name. She didn't know his world. But something told her, if she didn't show up, he wouldn't survive the night. And if she did, nothing would ever be the same. Rain battered the cracked windows of a small, dim apartment in Newark, New Jersey. The wind howled like a restless spirit outside, echoing down narrow alleyways and rattling the aging pipes in the walls. Inside, Olivia Hart quietly closed the door to her son's bedroom, careful not to disturb the soft, rhythmic breathing of the 8-year-old boy asleep under his dinosaur bedsheets. His favorite stuffed frog was tucked under his chin. The apartment smelled faintly of lemon cleaner and reheated soup, the only signs of stability in Olivia's otherwise unpredictable world. She was exhausted. Her feet ached from a 10-hour shift at the diner. Her back screamed for rest, and her phone's cracked screen lit up with yet another overdue utility alert. She sighed, rubbed her temples, and reached for the light switch in the kitchen. That's when the phone rang. A private number. Almost 2 a.m. Her first instinct was to ignore it. Unknown numbers this late never brought good news. But something. Curiosity, anxiety, perhaps a waitress's instinct to respond, made her pick up. "Hello," she said, voice low, cautious. There was a long pause. Then a man's voice, slurred but not drunk, just off. "You'll be here in 10, right?" he muttered. She frowned. "Excuse me. I need tonight to feel like something matters. Just come. Please. Make it quiet for a while." Olivia's spine stiffened. Her lips parted to respond, but then he kept speaking, unaware he hadn't ended the call. "I'll end it all after tonight. I'm done pretending I want to live." Her breath caught. The line was still open. Silence. Then a faint click. The call ended. She stared at the screen, stunned. A strange chill crawled up her arms. She redialed. No answer. Again. Straight to voicemail. She stood still in the center of her kitchen, clutching the phone, heart pounding. She didn't know this man. Clearly, he dialed the wrong number, likely mistaking her for someone else entirely. An escort, maybe. The implication was clear, but what haunted her wasn't the mistake. It was the sound of his voice when he thought no one was listening. That crack in it, that finality, that terrible, aching loneliness. She had every reason to let it go. She had a child asleep in the next room, bills unpaid, her own problems stacked like dirty dishes. But she couldn't shake the sound of his voice. Olivia quickly changed out of her diner uniform, threw on a hoodie, and tiptoed into her son's room. "Muck stirred. Where are you going, Mom?" he whispered. "I'm just stepping out for a little while," she said softly, tucking the blanket tighter around him. "Mrs. Delaney next door is going to sit with you. Is it work?" "No, honey. Just someone needs help." 5 minutes later, with Max safely in her neighbor's care, Olivia drove into the storm. Her tiny hatchback shuddered in the wind, the wipers fighting a losing battle against sheets of rain. The GPS led her out of the city and toward the hills, where the roads narrowed and trees leaned like quiet sentries over asphalt. The houses grew larger, grander, then they grew farther apart. Eventually, she turned onto a winding private drive, lined with dying trees and moss-covered stones. Her headlights swept across a rusted gate that stood permanently open, as if even it had given up trying to guard the place. The mansion beyond was massive, a shadow against the storm, its dark windows staring out like empty eyes. Only one light was on, a porch light, flickering like a weak pulse. Olivia parked and sat for a moment, breathing hard. Her fingers clenched the steering wheel. She had no idea what she was walking into, but it didn't feel like a trap. It felt like a man calling out from the bottom of something, not knowing if anyone would hear. She stepped out of the car. Rain soaked her instantly, plastering her hair to her face. She climbed the marble steps of the front porch, where weeds curled up between the stones. She knocked. Nothing. She knocked again, harder this time. Still nothing. Just as she turned to leave, the door creaked open with a slow, groaning resistance. A man stood behind it, barefoot, shirt wrinkled, hair unkempt, eyes swollen red as if he hadn't slept in days. "You're not who I called," he said. "No," Olivia replied, her voice steady despite the thunder behind her. "But I heard what you said about ending it." He froze. His face crumpled for a second. "I thought the line was dead." "I know," she said, stepping in from the storm. "That's why I came to see you." The door swung wider, and Olivia stepped inside, leaving the storm behind her. The air in the mansion was cold, not just from the absence of heat, but from something older, heavier. Grief, she thought, the kind that soaked into the walls. The grand foyer stretched upward into shadows, its chandelier unlit, covered in a thin veil of dust. The marble floors echoed beneath her soaked sneakers. Beyond the entry, the house seemed frozen in time. Faded portraits, untouched furniture, thick drapes half-drawn like the eyes of a sleeping giant. The man said nothing for a while. He closed the door behind her, then stood there, as though unsure what to do next. Olivia waited, hands folded, dripping quietly onto the floor. "This way," he said finally, voice low and hoarse. She followed him down a wide corridor lined with dim sconces and into a room that might once have been warm, welcoming. A den or a study. Now the fireplace was dark, the armchairs untouched. A single lamp cast a faint golden glow across an old leather couch and the table in front of it, scattered with unopened mail and a half-empty bottle of scotch. "I don't usually have guests," he said. "I figured," she replied gently. He gave a hollow chuckle and rubbed the back of his neck. "I'm Damien." "Olivia." He nodded, then gestured vaguely to the room. "You want to sit?" She did. The couch let out a soft sigh beneath her weight. Damien hesitated, then moved to a tall cabinet tucked in the corner, rummaging for a moment before pulling out a tin of tea bags and an old kettle. "No coffee," he muttered. "My sister used to say it made me mean." Olivia didn't respond, just watched as he moved through the motions with an awkward, haunted rhythm. The man had money, clearly. Everything in the room spoke of wealth, but none of it was alive. The silence wasn't peaceful. It was heavy, like it had been held too long. He returned with 2 chipped mugs and set them down, then crouched by the fireplace. With some effort, he struck a match, lit kindling, and coaxed the flames to life. Soon, the room began to glow softly, the shadows retreating just enough. Damien sat across from her and reached for his cup, staring into it. "She died right there," he said suddenly. "Right in this house. My sister, Lily." Olivia's eyes lifted slowly, but she didn't speak. She had depression, kept it hidden. Everyone thought she was getting better. She laughed at dinner that night, told me she was planning a trip. She went to bed, and she never got up. He took a long sip, his hands trembling just slightly. "I should have known. I lived with her. I saw her every day, but I didn't see her." Olivia's fingers curled around her own cup, warm now in her palms. Still, she said nothing. "I haven't touched her room since," Damien continued. "Can't walk past the hallway without seeing her door." The silence, his voice faltered. "It's loud, you know." She nodded. "Edo." The fire cracked softly. Outside, the storm continued its wild performance, but in here, time slowed. "I didn't call you," Damien said, eyes distant. "Not really. I was trying to call someone else. An escort. Just wanted to feel something. Forget for a while. But I guess I called the wrong number." "No," Olivia said softly. "You called the right one." He looked at her then, really looked. And for a moment, something flickered in his expression. Not hope exactly. Not yet. But recognition. Like one castaway spotting another through the fog. They didn't speak again for a while. They didn't need to. 2 strangers. 1 fire. And a mansion full of silence, finally letting someone in. Olivia sat curled on the couch, wrapped in a wool blanket Damien had brought her sometime in the night. She hadn't slept. Not really. Just drifted in and out, her mind tethered to the sound of the crackling hearth and the echo of his words. Across from her, Damien sat in a wingback chair, slumped slightly, his head tilted back. He was asleep, peaceful, but with furrowed lines still carved deep into his brow, as if even dreams couldn't smooth them away. Olivia glanced at the time. Nearly 6:30 a.m. Max would be waking soon, and Mrs. Delaney would need to get to her job. She stood quietly, folded the blanket, and placed it over the arm of the couch. Her sneakers squeaked faintly on the marble floor as she stepped toward the foyer. She had just reached for the door when she heard his voice, groggy and rough, behind her. "You're leaving?" She turned slowly. "I should. My son's at home. I wasn't planning to be gone this long." He pushed himself upright, rubbing his eyes. "Right. Of course. I didn't mean to keep you. I just—" Olivia waited. There was something unfinished in his tone. "I don't expect anything," he added quickly. "What I said last night, it wasn't fair to drop that on a stranger. I'm sorry. You don't have to apologize for being human." He nodded, gaze dropping. "Would you come back?" "Not for what I asked." "Just come." Olivia hesitated. Every instinct told her to run from this strange, heavy thing taking root between them. But there was something in his voice that made her pause again. It wasn't neediness. It wasn't manipulation. It was the voice of someone trying, clumsily, to ask for grace. "I might," she said quietly. "I've got a kid, a job, a life. But I might." Damien offered a tired, grateful smile. "That's more than I deserve." Olivia opened the door and stepped into the cool, wet air. The scent of soil and new beginnings lingered in the breeze. She came back 3 days later. This time, she brought sandwiches and a bag of groceries. The third time, she brought Max. He was shy, clung to her side on the threshold of the grand, echoing house. Damien crouched to his level, not with the forced cheer of an adult trying too hard, but with the quiet patience of someone who understood what it meant to be cautious around strangers. "You like dinosaurs?" Damien asked, gesturing to the tiny figure Max held in his fist. Max gave a reluctant nod. "I've got a garden full of things that look like they belong in Jurassic Park. Want to see?" Max glanced up at Olivia. She nodded, and he followed Damien into the courtyard. The garden was overgrown, wild with ivy and broken stone paths, but somewhere beneath it all was structure, beds of dried soil, an old fountain, a crumbling greenhouse. Olivia watched as Max knelt to poke at a patch of moss. Damien crouched beside him, telling him the names of different plants, some real, some clearly invented on the spot. Max giggled when Damien dubbed one a snapmouth fern. From then on, Olivia visited twice a week, sometimes more. Sometimes for an hour, sometimes for dinner. They started clearing the garden together, pulling weeds, lifting old planters, laying fresh soil. Olivia brought gloves for Max. Damien found child-sized tools in a box in the shed. They planted marigolds, basil, cherry tomatoes. Max claimed one planter for himself and stuck a hand-painted sign in the dirt, "Max's Jungle." Damien changed, subtly at first. He began shaving again, eating regular meals, picking up old notebooks and scribbling in the margins. He still fell into silences, still retreated when memories surged too close. But there was light behind his eyes now, dim but present. One afternoon, as Max chased a butterfly across the grass and Olivia swept soil from the stone steps, Damien turned to her and said, "This place hasn't heard laughter in years." She looked over at Max, then back at Damien. "Then it's about time laughter filled this home." It was a warm Thursday afternoon when the past arrived uninvited. The courtyard had finally begun to resemble something alive. Lavender swayed in the breeze beside newly sprouting tomatoes. Max sat cross-legged on the ground, carefully lining small stones around the base of his planter labeled Max's Jungle, his brow furrowed with intense focus. Olivia stood nearby, brushing dust from a wrought iron bench she and Damien had salvaged from behind the greenhouse. The air smelled of damp earth, cut grass, and the promise of something good. And then tires. Expensive tires. Crunching gravel with a kind of arrogance. Olivia looked up as a sleek black car rolled to a slow, deliberate stop in the circular drive. Its tinted windows reflected the sky like a secret. The door opened, and out stepped a woman with sharp heels and sharper eyes. Vivian. Damien's breath caught. He had just stepped onto the patio, still holding a trowel, his sleeves rolled up, dirt under his fingernails. Vivian was dressed like the world owed her an audience. Pristine white blouse, cream slacks, and sunglasses that likely cost more than Olivia's rent. She took one glance at the garden, then at Olivia, then at Max, and her lips curled into something brittle and poisonous. "Well," she said, removing her sunglasses slowly, "this is certainly not what I expected." Damien set the trowel down calmly. "Vivian, I was in the area," she said, walking forward as if the house still belonged to her. "Thought I'd check on you. I didn't realize you'd started running a daycare." Max instinctively moved closer to Olivia. Olivia's hand found his shoulder, firm, protective. Vivian turned to her, gaze sweeping with disdain. "And you must be the gardener?" Her eyes narrowed. "Or is this a more personal arrangement?" "I'm just helping," Olivia said evenly. "Helping?" Vivian snorted. "Of course you are." Damien stepped between them. "That's enough." Vivian's smile was ice. "Don't be naive, Damien." She sees a lonely man, a big house, and she moves right in with her little charity case. "You really think this is love? You think she's here for you?" Olivia's cheeks flushed, not with shame, but with anger fast and hot. But she said nothing. She wouldn't dignify it. Damien, however, did not flinch. "She saved my life," he said quietly, but firmly. "You walked away when I was at my worst. Olivia showed up when no one else did. She's not using me. She's the reason I'm still here." Vivian blinked, stunned. He continued, "You never loved me. You loved what came with me. The name, the events, the access. But you couldn't stand my grief. You couldn't be near the broken parts." Vivian's jaw clenched. "You'll regret this," she hissed. "You have no idea who she is. You're being conned, Damien." "Go home, Vivian," he said, voice low, "before you embarrass yourself more than you already have." She stepped back, jaw trembling with fury, eyes flicking between them like a spoiled child denied her prize. She turned on her heel, heels clacking sharply as she retreated to her car. The engine roared. Within seconds, she was gone, swallowed by the tree-lined road. The silence left behind was loud. Max looked up at Olivia. "Is she going to come back?" "No," Damien answered before she could. "Not if I have anything to say about it." Olivia crouched beside Max, checking that he was okay. When she looked up, Damien's eyes were still on her, tired but steady. "I'm sorry," she said softly. "I didn't mean to complicate your life." Damien shook his head. "You didn't complicate anything. You gave it color again." He walked toward her, kneeling to help Max gather his scattered stones. "You didn't cause a mess," he said without looking up. "You're the reason I started cleaning it up." Olivia watched him for a moment longer, then slowly smiled, tentative but real. Around them, the garden breathed like it had weathered a storm and knew now how to grow again. The confrontation with Vivian had long passed, but its shadow lingered in Damien like a slow-moving poison. Olivia noticed it in the way he moved, more carefully, more distant. His shoulders held tension he didn't speak of, and his smiles, when they came, were faint imitations of the ones he'd begun to reclaim. Max was asleep, tucked away in the guest room inside. Olivia was finishing dishes in the kitchen when she realized Damien hadn't come in. She hadn't heard the creak of the screen door, or his footsteps down the hall, or the quiet hum he made sometimes while brewing tea. Something in her gut turned cold. She stepped outside, the night pressing down like a weight. The garden, usually a haven of earthy calm, felt different now. Hollow. She walked the winding path toward the back fence, past the planters and the bench Max had painted blue. Then she saw him. Damien sat on the low stone wall near the hedge, his elbows resting on his knees. In his right hand was a small amber bottle, the cap off. His fingers trembled, the bottle swaying slightly with every shallow breath. Olivia didn't run to him. She didn't cry out or yank the bottle away. Instead, she stepped forward, slowly, carefully, and sat beside him. The silence stretched. "I didn't take anything," he said eventually, voice rough. "Not yet." She nodded, looking straight ahead at the garden beds, where marigolds now reached for the moonlight. "What stopped you?" Damien let out a hollow breath. "I don't know. Maybe I was waiting. Maybe I didn't want to do it in silence." Olivia turned to him. "Then you weren't trying to disappear. You were trying to be found." He didn't answer. His jaw clenched. His eyes filled, but he blinked it back like he always did. She reached over and took the bottle from his hand gently. He let it go without resistance. I know what Vivian said hurt, Olivia said softly. But she didn't break you, Damien. She just reminded you of a lie you already believed. He looked at her then, expression raw. What if it's true? What if I am just a broken man who only matters when he has something to give? Olivia shook her head. You matter. You always did. That night you called me. It wasn't a mistake. It was a cry for connection. And someone heard you. That's not weakness. That's bravery. His chest rose sharply. Then, for the first time in years, Damien broke. Tears slid down his cheeks, silently at first, then came in slow, guttural waves. He didn't shield his face. He didn't apologize. He wept like a dam finally cracked, like something inside had been held too long and no longer could be. Olivia stayed beside him, unmoving, her hand resting gently on his back. They sat like that for what felt like hours. The night wrapped around them, the air cool but not cruel. The garden bore witness, rows of growing things listening quietly as a man finally let go. When the tears eased, Damien leaned forward, resting his face in his hands, breathing raggedly. I'm tired of surviving. I want to live. You can, Olivia whispered. One day at a time. Not alone. He turned his head slightly toward her, and for a moment, the look in his eyes was not one of a man who had been saved, but of someone learning, for the first time, that he was allowed to save himself. There was no confession, no grand gesture, but something shifted. Not romance. Not yet. But survival shared. A promise spoken in silence. That whatever came next, they wouldn't face it in the dark. Not anymore. Spring unfolded slowly over the estate, like a breath being held and then released. The once wild courtyard had transformed. Where weeds once strangled stone paths, now tulips nodded in soft April winds. Rows of basil, sage, and marigold thrived under careful hands. The crumbling greenhouse had been cleared, patched, and given new glass teeth to catch the sun again. But it wasn't just the plants that had begun to bloom. It was the people. Damien had begun drafting plans in the weeks after the night in the garden. Something had shifted in him. Not just a will to live, but a need to give that life meaning. It started with a conversation on the porch. Olivia had been sipping coffee, watching Max sketch new ideas for his planner labels. I've got the space, Damien said. Too much of it. And you've got heart, vision. What if this place could be more than just a home? She lowered her mug. What do you mean? A sanctuary. For people like us. People trying to start over. The lonely. The grieving. The lost. He paused. For the ones who almost didn't make it. They started with what they had. Time, space, and soil. Within a month, Damien had contacted a small circle of therapists and grief counselors. Olivia tapped into her community, reaching out to single parents and support groups she'd quietly leaned on herself years ago. Word spread without much effort. Sometimes hope does that on its own. By early summer, the estate was no longer quiet. Each morning, the driveway filled with unfamiliar cars. Men and women emerged, some with guarded eyes, others with tired postures, many holding tightly to children or grief they didn't know how to name. There were veterans with invisible wounds, widows who'd stopped speaking, fathers raising daughters alone, teens navigating loss too young. Olivia welcomed them at the gates, her warmth disarming, her authenticity magnetic. Max, now comfortable in his junior garden chief role, offered a tour of the greenhouse with a clipboard and a crayon-made badge he insisted be worn with honor. Inside the garden, therapy took root. Literally. People planted things, dug deep, sat in circles on benches beneath newly repaired arbors, and shared their stories between pulling weeds and watering seedlings. Olivia and Damien organized grief circles every Thursday and open garden workshops on Saturdays. Families created memory pots in honor of lost loved ones. Kids learned to name herbs by scent, and grown-ups remembered how to smile in the process. Damien worked quietly, repairing old sheds, clearing paths, occasionally helping someone pick the right spot for wildflowers. He wasn't loud, wasn't polished, but he was present, always present, One evening, after the last group session of the week, people lingered beneath the twinkle lights strung through the courtyard trees. A soft breeze swept through, and laughter trickled across the property like music the house had long forgotten. Someone handed Damien a mug of cider. A few guests sat around a makeshift fire pit. Olivia stood across the courtyard with Max, watching him explain how compost wasn't gross if you knew what it did. Damien stepped forward, nerves knotting in his chest. He hadn't spoken in front of a group since his sister's memorial, but this moment asked for something, so he gave it. "I didn't plan this," he said quietly, eyes sweeping the crowd. "None of this was supposed to happen. I was supposed to stay inside, fade quietly, let the house rot like I was." The courtyard hushed, but then someone answered a call that wasn't meant for her. She showed up, not to save me, but to remind me I still existed. His voice cracked slightly, but he held steady. "Everything you see here, every flower, every bench, every laugh that's come back to these walls. It happened because she came when no one else would, and stayed." Olivia looked up, startled, her eyes wet before she could stop them. Max tugged her hand and whispered, "He's talking about you." She nodded. Damien raised his mug slightly. "To second chances, and to those brave enough to give them." The crowd murmured their agreement, quiet and full of something that had once felt far away, belonging. The mansion, for the first time in years, glowed from the inside out, not with chandeliers or showpieces, but with people who had dared to begin again. Tables were arranged beneath canvas canopies, covered in wildflower bouquets and hand-painted signs that read, "Willow Haven, 1 year of healing." It had been 12 months since the garden opened, 12 months since the silence was broken. Olivia stood near the back of the courtyard, hands clasped, watching as neighbors, volunteers, and families filled the space. Max stood center stage, a step stool beneath his feet so he could reach the microphone. He was 10 now, taller, surer. A green ribbon pinned to his chest marked him as junior founder, a title he declared was serious business. Clearing his throat, Max scanned the small crowd and began, voice steady but soft. "A year ago, this garden was just a place with dirt and broken stuff. I didn't know a lot about grief, but I knew what sad felt like. I knew what lonely felt like, too. Then I met Mr. Damien and the garden grew. But something else grew, too." He paused, glancing toward Olivia. "Hope," he said. "And it's still growing. That's what this place is about." The applause that followed wasn't loud, but it was real. It was the kind that meant something. Olivia wiped her eyes, one hand pressed to her chest as she exhaled shakily. Damien stepped beside her, taking her hand in his. His grip was warm and certain. "Did you know," he whispered, leaning close, "that I wrote a speech, too?" "Oh," she asked, eyes still damp. "What stopped you?" He smiled faintly. Max said it better. They stood together, quietly watching as guests hugged, laughed, and wandered toward the greenhouse. The breeze carried the scent of mint and lavender, mingled with soil and fresh beginnings. Damien turned to her, eyes searching her face like it was still the most extraordinary thing he'd ever seen. "You gave me a reason to live," he said, voice low. Olivia turned to meet his gaze. "And you gave us a place to grow." They stood there, fingers interlaced, not needing to say more. But Damien did anyway. "Sometimes," he said, voice catching on memory, "it only takes one call, one choice to rewrite a life." Olivia smiled through tears, nodding. "One wrong number," she whispered, "that turned out to be exactly right." And around them, the garden continued to bloom, not just with flowers, but with the stories of those who had found something here. Healing, hope, and home. If this story touched your heart, like, share, subscribe, and turn on the notification bell for more powerful, soul-touching stories that restore faith in humanity.